Washington Pod presents EARL Nightingale.
I spoke before the Western Resources Corporation group in Grand Bahamas recently and met a most interesting gentleman. I met many interesting people there, and I found Buzz Arndt, the Vice President and Director of Marketing, particularly interesting. He recommended that I read a book with the ridiculous title, Cloud Hidden, Whereabouts Unknown by Alan Watts, which I promptly ordered and put in my briefcase for reading. It's a good book. I have since also obtained a copy of Alan Watts' autobiography, entitled In My Own Way. Alan Watts died in February '74 after having lived a most interesting life and having written some 20 books. His books are considered the most penetrating and above all readable interpretations of Eastern religions. Although he did not restrict himself to writing about Eastern religions, he created the Zen boom in America and has been popular on college campuses from one end of the country to the other. If you haven't become acquainted with Watts' writings, I think you'll find them interesting and beneficial. I found his discussion of the Chinese Taoism of particular interest. Now, that's spelled Taoism and often mispronounced Taoism. Taoism. The Tao signifies the energy of the universe as a way, a current, a course, or flow which is at once intelligent and spontaneous, but not personal like a Western god. It would be absurd to worship or pray to the Tao because it's your own true self, the very energy and patterning of your bones, muscles, and nerves. Lao Tzu's first statement about it is that it cannot be defined, for the simple reason that you cannot make what is basically you and basically real an object of knowledge. You can't stand aside from it and examine it as something out there. Although then we cannot define it, we must not assume that it is something bleary like the blind energy of 19th century scientists. From our own point of view, our heads themselves are blind spots. But were it otherwise, we should be looking only at neurons and dendrites and would never see mountains and trees. But of course, when neurons and dendrites are seen from the inside, they become mountains and trees. Yet although Tao cannot be examined and pinned down, it has a characteristic atmosphere which may be sensed in the lifestyles of various Far Eastern poets, artists, and sages, and which is indicated by the term Feng Liu in Chinese and Furyu in Japanese, which means something like flowing with or following with the wind. It's also translated as elegance, which is not quite right because in English an elegant person is refined and fussy and perpetrates an atmosphere of haughty disdain. Whereas the Chinese poet is sometimes amiably drunken, wandering aimlessly in the mountains and laughing at falling leaves. One gathers that this sort of person is no longer allowed in China. But he's typified by Putai, the fat, laughing tramp Buddha who carries a gnarled staff and a huge bag of interesting rubbish which he gives away to children. Frederick Spiegelberg, the philosopher and Orientalist, visited a Taoist hermit like Putai on an island near Hong Kong. When he was introduced as an American university professor traveling under a Rockefeller grant to find out whether Asian spirituality was still vital, the hermit began to chuckle very gently, and this gradually developed into uproarious laughter, at which his whole glutinous mass shook like jelly, and that was the end of the interview. A more ancient Taoist sage, whose name I forget, was approached by a Chinese emperor one time to be an advisor to the government. He declined the offer with extreme courtesy, but when the emissary had departed, he washed out his ears, and also those of the donkey on which he customarily rode. Then there was the Chinese Zen priest, famed as a great painter, but who, unlike other priests, grew his hair long. After getting sufficiently drunk, he would dip his hair into a bowl of ink and then slosh it over a scroll of paper. The next day he'd give himself a Rorschach test on the splosh and see in it images of mountains, rivers, and forests, which needed only a few touches of the brush to bring them out for all to see. When I was invited to the tea ceremony by the artist and printmaker Saburo Hasegawa, he pointed out the subtle beauty of cigarette ash on a tile made by J.B. Blunk, which we were using for an ashtray. Now, these are vignettes to give you some suggestion of the atmosphere of flowing with the Tao. The principle of the thing is also recognized by our own surf riders, some of whom know very well that their sport is a form of yoga, or Taoist meditation, in which the whole art is to generate immense energy from going with your environment, from the principle of wu-wei, or following the gravity of water, and so making yourself one with it. For as Lao Tzu himself said, gravity is the root of lightness. Now, using this ancient Chinese principle, We learn the senselessness of trying to force our way upstream against the current. Flow with the river. It's another way of saying achieve serenity, or as we say today, or did at least, cool it. Get rid of tension and rigidity. Bend with the wind, and you'll still be around after the hurricane is gone and the good weather returns. It's like the principle of judo, which uses the power and force of your aggressor to defeat him. He makes the move. You simply channel him, using his own force and momentum to easily cause him to sprawl in the dirt. The same thing with the feeling of Taoism. It can be done to trouble, worries, situations which at first seem threatening, but which can, if we flow with the river, be turned to our advantage. A person with such an attitude and philosophy cannot be defeated. He smiles with the wisdom of understanding. He knows that he himself is a part of everything else, the very energy of the universe, and that he can best live and achieve whatever ends he decides upon by going with the wind, with the current, with ease and serenity, never with tension, never with force or strain. In the Western world, we've become used to such terms as the rat race, fighting the competition, getting our share of the market. A world in which tension and strained, concerned expressions are everyday things. We consume tons of tranquilizers to attempt to achieve the very thing that Taoism teaches. In sailing a boat, the force of the wind is used to sail to all points of the compass. With the same wind, we can go north or south, east or west. It all depends upon our attitude, the way we set our sails and proceed. Now, we cannot sail directly into the wind, but we can tack and arrive in good time. Now, we know the maximum speed of a sailboat by a simple formula. It's the square root of the length of the waterline. There's little use in trying to go much faster. If you're cruising in a sailboat, you shouldn't be in a hurry anyway. Alan Watts speaks of the energy of the universe. We can think of the energy of the universe as we think of the wind when sailing. The energy flows. We don't know what it is or where it comes from. We don't need to define it or try to bottle it up. It's there. It's available to us if we're wise enough to use it. We have only to set our course, stay at the helm of our lives, go with the wind and the current, and we'll arrive at our destination in good time, without tension, without worry or strain, or a coronary or an ulcer. What's more exhilarating, for example, than surf riding? Yet we're following the flow of the waves, going with the current, allowing ourselves to be swept along at great speed. Our job is one of skill and balance, learning to manipulate the surfboard. We can learn to sail a boat or ride a surfboard, and we can become expert at whatever we choose to do with our lives. Then we must learn to flow with the current, with the energy of the universe, and it'll bring us anything we seek. It's good to dwell on this ancient Chinese philosophy when driving in traffic, playing golf or tennis, sailing, skiing, selling, working, getting along with our families. It's a good way to go. Flow with the current, ride with the wind. Just keep the skills improving and a steady hand on the wheel and an eye on the sails. Don't push. Don't sweat and strain. Keep your blood pressure down. Move with the traffic. Relax. You'll get there just as fast and without the frayed nerves and dents. Remember, we're not here all that long. Let's enjoy the trip. On a speaking trip to Los Angeles recently,